In the last 90 days, one of Texas's biggest reservoirs has lost 90% of its water. 90%. That's not a typo, and it's not an exaggeration. I pulled the data myself. And right now, as of this recording, over 500,000 people, half, a million people, are facing the very real possibility of a total water shutdown. Not reduced pressure, not conservation advisories, a full shutoff. Let me show you exactly what's happening and why this is worse than most people realize. So let's set the scene. If you pulled up satellite images of this reservoir from, say, 2021, you'd see a massive body of water. Deep blues, wide arms stretching into coves, boats dotting the surface. It looked healthy. It looked permanent. Now pull up this week's imagery. What you see is a mudflat, cracked earth where the waterline used to be, docks hanging 15, 20 feet above dry ground, marinas completely landlocked. The water that remains is concentrated in a narrow channel near the dam, and even that is dropping fast. We're talking about a lake that once held over 1 million acre-feet of water, now sitting at barely 100,000. For context, 1 acre-foot is roughly 326,000 gallons. So the volume that's vanished? It's staggering. We're looking at hundreds of billions of gallons. Gone. Now here's the thing nobody's really talking about. This didn't happen overnight. This has been building since the summer of 2022, when Texas entered what climatologists at NOAA later classified as an exceptional drought. That's the highest category on their scale. D4. And while parts of the state got temporary relief from storm systems in 2023, this particular watershed didn't. Inflows into the reservoir, that's the water feeding it from rivers and tributaries, dropped by over 60% compared to the 10-year average. Meanwhile, demand stayed flat. In some months, it actually increased because the same heat and dryness that was killing the reservoir was also driving up residential and agricultural water use. So you had less water coming in and more water going out every single month for over 2 years. And the result is what you're looking at now. Let me put the drop in perspective, because 90% is hard to wrap your head on. The water level has fallen roughly 140 feet from its peak. 140 feet. That's not just a number. If you stood at the old shoreline and looked down to where the water is now, you'd be staring at the height of a 14-story building. The Statue of Liberty from the ground to the tip of the torch is 151 feet. This drop is almost that entire height. That's how much water is missing. And the rate of decline? According to monitoring data from the Texas Water Development Board, the reservoir lost 11% of its remaining volume in just the last 30 days. That's an acceleration. It's falling faster now than it was 6 months ago. And this is where the expert community is starting to use language that frankly caught my attention. Dr. John Nielsen Gammon, he's the Texas state climatologist, been in that role for over 2 decades, released an assessment last month calling the current hydrological conditions in the affected basin functionally unprecedented in the instrumental record. That means since we've been measuring, nothing like this has shown up. Separately, engineers with the Brazos River Authority confirmed that reservoir levels have dropped below what they call the critical pool threshold. That's the point below which the intake infrastructure, the actual pipes and pumps that pull water out of the reservoir and send it to treatment plants, starts to lose suction. In plain English, the water is getting too low for the system to physically move it, and once you cross that line, you're not rationing water anymore. You're losing it entirely. Now here's where it gets personal. I want you to think about what this actually looks like on the ground for the 500,000 people living in the service area. Maria Delgado. She runs a small restaurant in one of the towns closest to the reservoir. She told a local NBC affiliate last week that she's been cutting her operating hours because she can't reliably run her dishwasher or fill pots after 1 p.m. Her water pressure drops to almost nothing by early afternoon. She said, and this is a direct quote, "I've owned this place for 12 years, and I've never had to tell customers we're closing because we don't have water." She's not alone. Across the affected counties, schools have moved to 4-day weeks, partly to reduce facility water use. Youth sports leagues have been suspended. Car washes are shut down. Landscaping companies have laid off workers. And for families, the average household in the area is now spending between $40 and $60 a month on bottled water alone, just to have something to drink and cook with. That's on top of their regular water bill, which by the way hasn't gone down, because the utility still has fixed costs to cover, even when they can't deliver full service. So what does this mean for the people living there? Well, it doesn't stay contained. Here's how the dominoes fall. First, the direct impact. Residential taps go unreliable. Businesses can't operate normally. That leads to the second-order effect. Local economies contract. People stop eating out, stop shopping, start thinking about leaving. Property values in the affected area have already dropped an estimated 8 to 12% in the last 6 months, according to county appraisal data. That leads to the third-order effect. The tax base shrinks, which means less revenue for the very municipalities trying to fund emergency water solutions. And then you get the unexpected connection. Agricultural operations that depend on the same watershed start competing with municipalities for whatever's left, and suddenly, you've got a legal fight over allocation rights that could take years to resolve while people are going thirsty right now. And I haven't even mentioned the energy angle. Texas's power grid, and you already know the grid has had its issues, depends on water for cooling at thermal power plants. Several facilities in the region pull cooling water from tributaries connected to this same system. If those levels keep dropping, we're not just talking about a water crisis. We're talking about a potential energy reliability issue layered on top of it. During a Texas summer, when demand for air conditioning peaks, you see how this compounds. Now, some of you are probably thinking, hasn't Texas dealt with droughts before? And you're absolutely right to ask that. The drought of 2011 was devastating. It caused over $7 billion in agricultural losses alone. Lake Travis and Lake Buchanan hit record lows. But here's the critical difference. During 2011, the affected reservoirs were at roughly 50 to 60% capacity at their worst. We're at 10% now. And the recharge rate, the speed at which a reservoir can refill once rain returns, is dramatically slower when you're this depleted, because the soil is so dry it absorbs rainfall before it can reach the tributaries. Hydrologists call it the sponge effect. The ground itself becomes a competitor for every drop of rain. So what's being done? 3 main efforts are underway. First, emergency water transfers. The state has authorized temporary pipeline connections to neighboring water systems that still have capacity. That could provide short-term relief for some of the affected population, but engineers estimate it'll cover maybe 30% of normal demand at best, and it takes weeks to get the connections operational. Second, an accelerated groundwater drilling program. The Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer underlies part of the region, and the local water authority has fast-tracked permits for new municipal wells. But drilling takes time, 3 to 6 months per well. And there are concerns about aquifer sustainability if too many straws go into the same glass. Third, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality has proposed emergency conservation mandates that would restrict outdoor watering entirely and limit commercial water use to essential operations only. Those rules could take effect within the next 2 weeks. Will these measures be enough? Experts are honestly split. Dr. Wendy Jepson, a water security researcher at Texas A&M, has said publicly that the transfer infrastructure helps, but doesn't address the structural deficit. Her team's modeling suggests that without significant rainfall, and I mean weeks of sustained, soaking rain, not just a passing thunderstorm, the reservoir could hit what she calls effective zero within 4 to 5 months. That's the point where what's left isn't usable without massive treatment investment. If you're in the affected area, here's what the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality recommends right now. Fill bathtubs and large containers while pressure is still available. Identify your nearest emergency water distribution point. Most counties have published these locations online. Reduce indoor water use to essentials only. And monitor your local utility's website or social media for shutoff notices, because the timeline can shift quickly. This isn't just a Texas problem anymore. What's unfolding here is a case study in what happens when extreme drought, aging infrastructure, and growing demand collides at the same time. Water experts across the Sunbelt, from Arizona to Georgia, are watching this closely because the same conditions exist in dozens of other communities. The next few weeks are critical. If rain doesn't come, and if the emergency measures can't keep up, this could become the largest municipal water failure in modern Texas history. For updates on this developing situation and more crisis coverage that cuts through the noise, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. If this affected you or someone you know, share this video. More people need to understand what's happening before it reaches their community. I'm tracking this daily, and I'll have an update for you as soon as the situation changes. See you next time.